Hi, this is Scott Bradfield, and this is our third episode trying to encompass or to read through one of the great comic novels of all time, J.R. by William Gaddis. We're gonna go from page 40. We stopped at page 40 in the first summarizing episode, and I'm going to take it through page 126 for no other reason that that's the section that fell out of my book and I took in the bathtub today. So, we're going to have a lot of characters coming at us. My summary is going to be extremely imperfect. I'm going to make lots of mistakes. I basically want to just sort of orient you to the scenes and where you are from page to page so that you can sort of enjoy the scenes when you get lost. You can go back, introduce you to characters who you should pay attention to in the course of the book, and my information may be imperfect, or will definitely be imperfect from time to time. So we ended at page 40, and we're in the school, the principal's office, clicking around from all the different classrooms that are on display, that they're taping and they're recording and they're playing movies to these kids. And as one of these various administrative people and foundation people says they want to run the school like a corporation. And this is 75, and all of the crap gets worse since 75. Gibbs comes and goes in that scene, and then and they have some very funny scenes with Gibbs. Again, lots of scatological humor. So anywhere Gaddis can make a joke about art as shit. The idea, there's a section where they're talking about the silkworms, just exuding this silk, and they're using one of these nature documentaries, and that's going on in the background. They mention a man named Shepperman. I've mentioned this before. He's an artist who worked at the school. Basically, all the artists in this book. There's Eigen is going to come up soon. He's a writer, modeled slightly on Gaddis himself. Shepperman is a painter. Edmund Bast is a composer. All of them are people who want to create their own world of art. And Bast makes this very clear. He wants to have his own section of the house that is purely his music. And he wants to write music that takes you somewhere out of this crappy world. All of them are totally compromised by the crappy world. And that's sort of the joke. At one point they mention Mr. Shepperman who's selling his blood for money to buy paint. Blood for money for paint. And Shepperman produces a painting which comes back and forth through the book, and it shows up in the offices of Moncrief and Cates in the next few scenes. And basically all the people who commission this painting are only concerned with whether it matches the carpets and the drapes. They don't care what's in the painting. So there's this constant sad humor, but it's hilarious humor. So we go on. Gibbs comes and goes through that scene. That scene goes on quite a while. We're introduced to the notion of a foundation. There's a non-profit foundation which has hired Bast. We're going to come back to that idea soon. And then on page 53, we're in the background, one of the minor characters who's hilarious is Vogel. I mentioned him before, Coach Vogel. He's terribly scarred. And I forget how they hired this guy to teach at the school. But he's horrifically scarred. And he's making films. And in some ways, he's making films about the human body. And he's completely insane. And like most coaches in junior high schools. And he's making these films about how the body is like this giant industrial machine. And all through the book, this disfigured man will be showing up. And it's almost always Coach Vogel. We're introduced really to Dicephalus. It's a weird name, obviously invented, which suggests mental issues. And he's the school psychiatrist, I believe. And he's got a wife who works at the school, whose name I think is Anne, without an E. I couldn't find it just now. But she's the really pretentious woman she's walking around in a sari at the SARI when she first shows up, and she flirts with Edmund as soon as she meets him. And Dicephalus takes her home. He drives her home to his house where they have this really old dog, and there's a crazy old man in the house on page 55 who they each refer to as Dad. And I'm pretty sure dad is the man who is playing the saxophone in the scene with Bast when he's rehearsing the Wagner, and this old man who smells a great deal, and who is ultimately just exuding shit throughout the course of the 700-page book. Both Cephalus and his wife think he's the other person's father. So they keep referring to him as dad, but I think it turns out nobody knows who the hell this old guy is. Cephalus is constantly worried about money. And you can see a lot of the anxieties in this book are Gaddis' own about money and divorce and all the expenses and the inability to find the time and space to write books like J.R. And Cephalus is constantly going in and out of the rooms, turning off lights. On page 57, this is an important moment in the book. It's the first time, really, Bast is on his way home. And on his way home, he meets J.R. for the first time. Bottom of page 57. Again, he's not... J.R. is rarely noted as his name. His name is very rarely given when he shows up. But you can tell him because he's extremely overly cordial. He's needy. He's always looking for someone to talk to. He's always asking questions. He's inquisitive and not incredibly bright, but super inquisitive. And he tends to ask the obvious questions, which, of course, most people can't answer for him. He's the one who stole the paper bag, as Bast mentions to him. And he's always... The other thing that's noted about J.R. is whenever he shows up or you see a kid who's got torn sneakers, he's not well-dressed. He's obviously a neglected kid who no one's really paying attention to, and his sneakers are always torn. The other person with torn clothing will be Gibbs. So Gibbs will often have torn holes in his shoes and tears in his pants. And you'll sometimes just get indications of those that will let you know who's talking. At one point, and J.R. is carrying around huge piles of pamphlets. This is one of the funniest parts of the book. Every time you see him, he's got all these pamphlets. He's rented, as he mentions to Bast in this scene, I believe, he has rented a post box locally. And every time there's something in the newspaper about make money now or earn big rewards selling such and such army surplus goods or draw this picture and you'll become an artist, every time someone offers get rich quick schemes, J.R. sends off for it. And he has this huge box of papers that just say things like success, selling, secrets, success secrets, and he's carrying these all around, and he's often reading them out loud in the course of the book. And as Bast goes off, everybody kind of misstates things in their conversations. The last thing J.R. says to Edmund, who he's attracted to as a person, he wants to know him, and he wants his help, as he does from many of the older men he meets. He's very interested in Bast, and he's very interested in Gibbs. And he says, as he says goodbye, maybe we can use each other sometime, okay? And using one another seems to be the corporate mentality of capitalism that he is that Gaddis is continually making fun of. When we have one of those little expository or descriptive passages where we go back to the house, and the two older women, is it Anne and Julia? There's several people with the same names, I think. So Anne and Julia, the older women, are talking to Stella. Stella is Bast's cousin, and there's a scene in here on page 60 for the next few pages where Stella is obviously sniffing around to find out about the inheritance. It becomes clear that she has a scar all the way around her head, which she says is from a thyroid removal of a thyroid. And this suggests, and there's a lot of things that suggest, there's something mentally wrong with Stella. And as the old women mentioned, her eyes don't seem connected to her expression. So she's an attractive woman, but with this peculiar disfigurement, like many of the characters in Gaddis. So there's a little bit of talk here. They go a little bit more into Thomas and James's history with the piano rolls, and then all the various famous musicians Saint-Saëns, and I forget who else comes through, Scriabin, I believe. All these various famous musicians have come through this house when Thomas and James were doing the piano rolls. They were recording these great musicians. So those great artists have been through the house, and they mention them. And of course, the hammering is continuous through this chapter. Now, Edmund comes home, and he talks to Stella, and he takes Stella off to his section of the house. I believe that's right in here. So much happens, and I've read this in the last 24 hours. I just forget so much of it. It really is an immersive book. You just have to kind of just go into it. You're not going to see every sight that goes by and enjoy the main thrust of it, the main story. But there are certain little bits that I particularly like. So we have, she speaks with Edward. Did I say Edmund earlier? Edward is the young man in this. And she's nosing around, and as she's nosing around, Edward finds that his room has been burglarized. And she mentions that she's Stella Angel now. She's married to a man named Angel, whose original name was Engels. Then we go to the train station, and Edward likes Stella. He's attracted to women, and he's lonely. So the two women he's most attracted to are Stella and Mrs. Joubert. And he wants to take her to the train station, but she gets off without him. And when she goes to the train station, she runs into Gibbs on page 75. And they talk a little bit, and it's clear that there was a relationship between her and Jack Gibbs at some point. Now, we then... the junk mail, also, the other thing with the junk mail is when JR's getting all his junk mail, there's lots of smut in it. And the world that we're going through, there's constant, sex movies and cards in phone booths, and there's kind of, amongst the junk mail, all the sexual junk mail as well. Now, one of the passages that I like here, I thought I would read a little bit, is we have the next scene about page in the mid-70s is Edward runs into Mrs. Joubert on the train into town. And this begins a really long riff about all the kids. Mrs. Joubert gets her social studies class. They save money, and they're going to go buy one share of diamond cable. And keeping track of diamond cable in this book is sort of, it could be fun. I have trouble doing it because it goes through all these permutations. It's owned by all these different holding companies. The central joke of it, though, is cable. It's the old joke of laying down cable, as you may not know, means to take a dump. And the laying down the cable and the diamond cable, there's lots of references to it as crap, as often is in this book. When they're going into town, JR is heard by Edward, who runs into Mrs. Joubert, reading through all his success pamphlets. And I thought I'd read a little passage here because he's reading out all these things about, it starts off with the Playboy Club. And he wants to, he's getting invitations to join the Playboy Club, even though he's 12 years old. What does he say here? It's this, what kind of a club? He says, I got invited to join a club. What kind of club? He's talking to Hyde's son. It's this club, see? You step inside and suddenly excitement surrounds you. You enter a world highlighted by the soft, flickering glow of open hearth fireplaces, the attentive rustle of beautiful bunnies, the bright colors of original... He's reading this from the pamphlet. Bunnies? What kind of club is that? And a heady house party atmosphere that seems to prevail. What, these are bunnies? These girls with their ass sticking in this guy's face? Where do you join it? Dear friend, if you are now a Playboy Club key holder, or if this is your second invitation to join the Playboy Club, please accept our apologies. In each area where Playboy Clubs are being placed in operation, there exists a certain select group of individuals. How much does that say? 25 cents? You a member? Dollars. No. Crap. I got almost the same thing, only it's free. Look, Dear friend, this month, Rancho Hacienda Estates is ushering in the season with a succession of gala bouquets. These are all, banquets, I'm sorry. All these are advertisements for real estate. There's sex, there's Playboy clubs. There's one about I want to make more money selling advertising book matches. And JR is interested in anything that will make money. That's because he's a kid who's grown up in a world in which that is all anyone talks about. They go on. I don't want it to go too far. I want to mention a few more things. It is a book where you can get just inundated if you try to discuss every specific part. But let's just skip through a few passages here where we go into town. Mrs. Joubert takes the kids in. They meet her father is Montcrieff. I think it's General Montcrieff. And her uncle is Cates. And they're basically running this big investment pile of crap that they run. And the kids are taken in and given this big, you're now part of the American dream speeches, and they're put in front of movie cameras. And in the midst of this very, very funny long scene, the heads of this place are developing a complicated system of tax avoidance, which will establish a foundation in Amy Joubert, this kind of idealistic young woman, her name. So there's a lot of jokes about that. And they're also dealing with a country called Gandia, where where the diamond company is working. And in Gandia, there's actually this big revolution by, as I think Montcrieff keeps saying, a bunch of left-wingers. So in the course of it, this whole wider political world is sort of being laid out for us as it's being, yoked into this one little share that JR and his school friends purchase from them. So this scene goes on quite a while. It's very funny. You should be able to follow most of it. The name of Eigen, E-I-G-E-N, will come up. And Eigen is their copywriter. He writes some of their copy, and he's working on a book to celebrate Montcrieff, who runs the company, or one of the people who runs the company. And Eigen will come in significantly later. He's the Gaddis-like writer. And so this goes on for quite a while. In the course of it, there's one part where JR wants to go to the toilet, and JR is constantly asking questions. So all through these scenes, when you hear somebody asking about, at one point they say, every shareholder gets to vote and tell us when we are doing a bad job. And JR is the first one to say, well, look, we own one share. We get one vote. And you're saying that guy's got 300,000 shares. Does he get 300,000 votes? And he's constantly asking the right questions, which everyone shoves under the mat. And at one point he says he's got to go to the toilet. And JR says, I need to use the toilet. And they give him a key. And he says, what do I need? Why do you got a key on the toilets for? Are you afraid someone's going to steal them? The idea of stealing shit is, again, the same old joke in the book. And as JR is in the bathroom, they're in there. He and the Hyde boy, I think it is, are talking about how they can make money and trying to understand this whole monumental capitalist enterprise of selling shares. And while they're in there, they hide in the toilet and hear I think Montcrieff and a couple of the big shots come in and start talking about how they're basically running a tax avoidance scheme. It's all tax avoidance. And at one point, there's one he says, some stupid people don't know the difference between tax evasion and tax avoidance. That's why they're paid the big money, is they can tell the difference between those two things. I'm going to skim through most of this now. There's so many passages I would like to read out loud. Eventually the kids make a mess of the whole place, and the place is a mess anyway. And their lunches, they buy a whole bunch of lunches, and the ceilings start leaking. I forget why. Probably the toilets upstairs start leaking. I don't remember. And the kids all run off, and Mrs. Joubert takes them to an automat to feed them. And in the automat, she runs into Edward again, who has been in town trying to get work since he's pretty much lost his last job conducting Wagner for junior high schools. And while they're there, she has to borrow all the money that Edward has. He's totally broke in the book. And she has to borrow money from him so the kids can buy their lunches. And they run into Gibbs. And Gibb meets Joubert. Amy Joubert is one of the real tragic characters of the book. Gibb is very comic tragic. Amy Joubert is really just sort of tragic and a sad woman. She's going through a bad divorce. Her son is ultimately stolen, I believe, by the husband, who's Swiss, and he's an international character, and he sounds like a bit of a con man. And she's lonely and she's sad, and she's also considered beautiful and well figured woman. The boys are always talking about, if they can see her tit or not. And Gibb meets her, and he confesses that whenever he's looking at the cameras in the school, he looks at her classroom with the sound down. So he's been attracted to her for a long time. Gibb runs a con where he sends Edward home with the kids. He sends them off, makes Edward take all these kids home so he can take Amy out, Mrs. Joubert, for the evening. And in the last few pages, up through about 120 to 125, on the way to the train station, because they have to wait for their train, Edward takes the kids to a Western, though they get very close to going to a porn film because there's so many movie theaters during Times Square. So they go into a Western, and they meet a man named Gall, who I forget. I think he's shown up already before, but he does come up later. And Gall, somehow he sneaks in with them so that they pay for his ticket. And then they leave, and they get back on the train. They go back to wherever they are in the suburbs. And we have J.R. looking through his portfolio. As you see, business opportunities. They're get-rich-quick schemes that J.R. has been scribbling on. And on the course of the trip home, it turns out none of the kids have tickets. And Edward's constantly getting screwed money-wise. He has to borrow $10 from J.R. And J.R. lends him the $10. That where he's got it from, I forget. But he stole some of it from the school fund, and he's been working this into some sort of cash here and there. And he's given him the $10, and now he's already starting to think about charging Edward interest on the $10 because he's going to take this $10 or $20 that J.R. has is going to ultimately turn into this huge junk bond empire. The joke, and it's not just a joke, it's sort of the truth of the book, is how people who make lots of money, I mean, we're living with a president like this, who use that as an exemplum of their intelligence, are often just incredibly stupid people who only think about profit or shit. And that's all. How much shit can they get? And it's a very obsessive quality, and it's a relentless quality and a petty quality that J.R. develops in abundance in the next 600 pages. Okay, I hope that wasn't too much to cover. It's a very funny book, and it's just going to get funnier and funnier. But those are the characters I think you should be thinking about, and the relationship between Gibb and Joubert and Edward is going to develop quite a bit in the next 600 pages. All right, I'm going to do these pretty quick. Every couple of days I'll try to do another 100 pages or so. Bye.